Hi, I am SB Rawz. I'm a coach and a messy whole human. And this is Karen Chase joining
Hi.
me for another all up in it conversation. 35-ish minutes of reporting from the complicated, exhilarating midst of learning.
Mm,
Karen, I'm so excited to be in this space with you.
no, me too. Zoom is second best to being physically in the same space.
It is second best. It is second best. We'll be physically in the same space again someday. I feel confident of
Hope
that.
so.
Well, so let's kick this off the way I always kick this off, which is by asking you how you understand yourself as a human these days.
This is one of those questions that I've been gnawing on for weeks since we scheduled this. And, it is, you use the word messy, and my head is all over the place, and it's a messy definition.
Mm.
Um, I know after I had 3 or 4 months with people in and out of my house, I know that I'm more introvert than I realized, even though I really classify as an extrovert. Um, that I really crave that time alone to work on things. I know that
Yeah.
now. Um, I probably would use just a bunch of different definitions like we did in our coaching sessions because that's some of the things that we did together. I'm a very curious person. Curiosity ranks really high on my list of learning and knowing. I don't tend to do that on a surface level. I tend to do it on a pretty deep level.
Mm.
And I know that I also need to sometimes set a timer on doing that because I can spelunk down into caves of learning pretty rapidly. Um, I'm a little bit more fiercely feminism than I realized a few more than a year ago when Roe v. Wade changed, when
Mhm.
I began working on a women's healthcare account, when I started doing more writing regarding a woman from history. So I realize I'm a little bit um, gnashing my teeth more than I thought I was going to be on that subject. Um, but yeah, and I'm more than work. I'm more than a writer, more than marketing, more than what I do behind the computer every day. And those are some of the things that I know about myself now. As now that I'm in my 50s, which I'm
Yeah.
still stunned every time I think of that I'm in my 50s now. Um, yeah, I so far so good. The decade's okay. I learned it so much.
Sounds like it's been an extraordinary time of learning already.
It has, it has. I'm learning to love a little differently. I'm learning to share more time with my family, with my partner, um, in different ways than I did in my 30s, for sure. But um, it's enriching all of it, which is good at this point in my life.
Mm. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. There are about 50 things in there I want to ask you about, but I'm gonna
Well, you said it was 5 minutes of describing that, and I was like, "Oh my god, can I fill 5 minutes? Maybe two, but it feels a lot in two."
Yeah, it was great and so rich, and I think I find that very exciting. I find the perpetual learning very
Mhm.
exciting, even while perpetual change can be a little daunting and sometimes a lot daunting.
Again, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
perpetual. That's funny you use that word, right? That's one of my interlings is Perpetua.
Yes.
Always needs to have things structured and organized. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
one of my girls on the inside.
One of your resources slash people to keep an eye on,
Oh yeah,
interlinks to keep
yeah.
an eye on.
Yeah, she cleans far too much, so she needs to be kept in check, and the broom needs to be hidden.
I love that. You gotta put the broom away, Perpetua. Also, it sounds like you're all up in a whole lot, and I wonder what feels particularly present to you as you join me in this conversation. Like, yeah, what do you want to share with us today about what you're all up in?
I'm all up in, project wise. I think we talked about this just briefly. I'm while I am working in a marketing capacity on women's healthcare, um, I am also working on discovering, compiling, gathering information about a woman from the 18th century that went west 2 decades before Lewis and Clark and kept a journal for Thomas Jefferson. And um, she's just been used by a lot of male historians over the years to write books about other male figures. And I'm really striving now to lift her from the footnotes of history, as I say. And she occupies my thoughts a lot these days. I just finished. I'm in the Daughters of the American Revolution, which we'll talk about later as part of my nonprofit discussion. They are the Daughters of the American Revolution. We can prove ancestors all the way back to someone who supported the revolution. And I just completed all the paperwork connecting Eliza and her mother to a living descendant in Vermont. And I did all the paperwork for that woman. And when I say it was me and upwards of 15 or 16 people who helped me find we have to find birth, death, and marriage all the way for every generation, all the way back.
Wow.
And for every person in that. So for every man and woman that got married, there has to be a birth, death, and marriage for each of them. And it was fascinating. It was like that TV show PBS, Finding Your Roots, right? I mean, we just kept digging and digging, and we found old wills from 1812, and we found, draft records and pictures and portraits that were done of these people as much as we could, and silhouettes that were cut out for these people. So, I mean, it's been a real fascinating hunt and peck through history. And yeah, just having completed that first step of getting this done, if knock on wood, if the genealogists at the DAR headquarters agree with me that all this proof is correct, I'll have what I need to maybe get historical markers made for these women. So they don't have them at this point. So right now they're kind of unseen women from history, or they've been used to describe the other founders. So it's like 1% of 1% of how big the project could be. And I'm trying to, right now, and this is hard for me because I normally see the ending of what I'm working on as I'm working.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the ending on this is going to be yet. I don't know if it's a book, multiple books, a screenplay. I don't know, a stage play. I don't know. So this is just, and that's hard for me to do. I always see where I'm going, and I don't necessarily right now.
Wow. So there were two there were two endings with question marks on them there. There was the 1% of 1% of this whole huge and when you said that, do you mean pulling up women from the footnotes of history? Is that what you mean by the 1% of 1%?
Just with regard to the information that I found about Eliza and her mother, Mary Howell, I pretty much, that proof that we just did for the DAR is probably 1% of 1% of the information that I'll be putting together.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
I may be estimating incorrectly, and it may be 1%, but that still feels like a lot left, right? So
yeah. And so to not have the vision of the end, how do you stay? What helps you stay? That's what I mean by the how. Like what helps you stay in the ground or on the path or whatever the right language?
It was biting off the small pieces is what did it. I started to make a list of the small pieces. I knew I could gather the proofs for the DAR application. Then I knew I needed to find, a DAR chapter that would help me finish the paperwork. So, but the paperwork was all like one project in and of itself that I could complete. And I was like, okay, and we'll see what I find in there that informs me of what to work on next. And I have a couple little like second and third steps that I think I need to go through. And so when the proof was done, I looked at that second step and said, okay, yeah, now the second step is I need a database of all the places where letters and memorabilia for this woman might be,
Mm.
because now I have this massive pile of stuff and I need to catalog it somehow. So that was just the second step. So it's the little things. What's that book, Atomic Habits? Is that the one where it's like, instead of making these huge, massive decisions about, I'm going to write a book and it's going to be this, that I'm just going to work on these pieces that are going to maybe contribute to that.
Mhm.
I guess I learned with my first book, with my first novel, that all good plans can be ruined by the events of history. And what I think needs to happen with this Eliza project might be defined much differently once I see all her writings together.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because if it really is about her voice, she needs to tell me what to do.
Yeah. Ah.
That,
Good.
that's a very different place for me to be. And
Mhm.
like I said, between marketing and my last few books, like, I wrote them, I created them, I knew what the endings were going to be. When I work on a marketing campaign, I know that I have to hit benchmarks and I have a deadline.
Mhm.
So it is kind of, yeah, it's different doing this,
Yeah.
and seeing those small baby steps instead as whole complete projects.
Yeah. And what are you learning about yourself in the process of navigating this piece of history? You've alluded to it earlier. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, I pulled out a stack of books, of course, so I can reference them as we go. This book, Flourish, that I just read, was wonderful. It's the woman who created the New Philosopher magazine.
Oh.
Um, but one of the things I learned through this project is something that she mentions in here called, and I don't know if I'm going to be pronouncing it correctly, Wu Wei. So it's WU-WEI. And it means that we get into creative flow. I do when I get really writing or I'm really into a design project. You get into this creative flow where like the rest of the world falls away.
Mhm.
Well, Wu Wei is like that, but instead of the rest of the world falling away, you realize all the helpers that you need to get that thing flowing correctly. And that is more of an Eastern way of looking at flow, creative flow. And I really have noticed that, like, those 15 or 16 people who helped me with those proofs,
Mhm.
the energy that they bring into the project with the things that they've discovered or the things they helped me with. Like, even my neighbor who's a French teacher came and helped me decipher a will that was in French one day. He knew the French and I knew how 18th century handwriting looked, and together we transcribed this thing. And
Wow.
to me, those moments, I mean, seeing his excitement at being a part of it, that that was more exciting to me than working on my own.
Mhm.
And having had my own business for now almost 20 years, and and kind of working in these long stretches where you're on your own working on books, that term, it turns out I get real jazzed and real energized from that.
Mhm.
It is you asked, what's the motivation that keeps you going if you don't know the end? And that is some of it too,
Mhm.
working with these other people who have a greater expertise than I do. But collectively, we have a greater expertise.
Mhm.
It's it's pretty sweet. It's a pretty sweet spot to hit.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. And it's an interesting contrast to what you were saying earlier about recognizing that there's more of an introvert to you. And I wonder if that was part of where you were going to take us today, if I'm giving you a segue or if I'm opening up a door
Yeah,
you don't want to walk through.
yeah, no, I am. I mean, that it is a balance, right? Um, as you know, my partner is a psychotherapist, and we talk about how traits like this are on a line, like they're on a clothesline,
Mhm.
and you're the clothespin. And sometimes you're zooming over to the introverted side, sometimes you're zooming to the extroverted side, but it's your ability to move back and forth that is important.
Mhm.
Um, and I came from a family that was incredibly introverted, but I was the extroverted one that they weren't anticipating. You know, wanted to have everybody over to the house and wanted to have a good time at the party and would rather have been a stand-up comedian and, some things like that. So it's finding that balance in those things. But I realize how much I treasure that introverted, that quiet time to be able to really settle in and breathe and get deep down into a project with all the bells and whistles shut off on the phones and the computers and stuff, so I can really, singularly focus, because I think the world requires that of us sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if there's something for you about place. Like you know
Mhm.
me, I love people, I love getting in front of people, I love connecting with people, and I'm very
Mhm.
protective of my home space as like a nest that that I see and feel differently in the context of who is here. And so I'm selective and particular, and I wonder if that is a thing for you.
I didn't think it was. And then we hosted a couple for a few months in our house,
Mhm.
um, who were very different from us, ran very different schedules than we did. And I always wondered, like, could I open my house as an Airbnb? Because I have this wonderful guest room and I have a bathroom that I don't use that's, pretty close to the guest room. And it turns out that's a big fat no. I don't mind having guests. I love having people come stay, but for long stretches,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm like you. I realized how much my home is my sanctuary and my safe place is the wrong word. It's almost like it's a big cozy blanket of what is that? Hygie? Is that
I don't
the
know how to
word?
pronounce it, but I know HYGGE, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it is my cozy place,
Mhm.
so when that's disturbed by people who stay up to 1 o'clock while I go to bed at 9:30,
Mhm.
I really feel it. And I realize how much that is important to me. And so is open doors. When you have people who stay in your house for a long stretch, they tend to keep their doors shut. And I'm not that girl. I like having my doors open.
Is that partially symbolic? What does it mean to you to have open doors?
It's view. It's being able to look out far distances and not feeling like I'm stuck in a box. And Karen never likes to be put in a box. I mean, that's the definition of a designer, right? Like, how many designers does it take to change a light bulb? Does it have to be a light bulb? You like doing things a little bit differently. That's just the nature of the designer in me, I think, is to do that, to think of different ways and more unique and creative ways to do things. So
Mm.
the open doors really is an open mind
Yeah,
symbol for sure.
yeah, I can appreciate that.
I'm sure you can.
Yeah. The wholeness of it, right? Like
Yeah.
even the way very frequently I notice when people ask me how I am, the first thing that I do is I look out my window, and
Mhm.
it's not an actual like looking into my, sometimes we move our eyes and we're really looking more deeply into our minds, and it really isn't that. It's the space where we live informs how I'm feeling in a lot of ways, or it's integral, or there's something about clearly I don't have the words for this yet, but there's just something about how when I look out there and I see the curve of the Blue Ridge Mountains and the way the sun filters into this particular holler, like it does something to me every time. And so people
Oh,
say,
and it's such a beautiful part of the country where you are too. It
"Oh,
really is.
it is. And Richmond is beautiful too, in very different ways.
It
But
is. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing I think I've discovered in the last couple of years. And I think we talked about this when I was going through the coaching with you, is how important those seasons are,
mhm.
and embracing those different seasons for what they bring to you and not always looking at seasons the way everyone else looks at seasons.
Yeah.
Um, on to the second book.
Oh, yay.
I think
Winter.
we've talked about this one before,
Yeah.
Wintering by Catherine May. I found it such a relief to know that winter could be such a productive time.
Hmm.
Instead of looking at winter as the sad time where you don't get to be outside during the evenings and things as much, I was like, "Ooh, I get to hunker down in front of the fire and read all the books that I have missed reading during the summer because I was out biking and out playing." And it's also a grand time for me to get up in the morning and throw the twinkle lights on in my office and have some quiet time in the office in the morning to tinker around with writing. And I find I'm really productive in the winters.
Yeah.
So knowing that that season is coming soon, you know, kind of delighted by it.
Ah, that's wonderful. I love that. I love that. And I'm so glad that you're saying that to me now. I was walking today looking at the beauty of the autumn and thinking about, just noticing, right? Noticing an array of feelings, and we can
Yeah,
contextualize them beautifully.
yeah. I think breathing in the seasons, and we get that. We get the joy of that in Virginia because you get 3 months of every season. You
Hmm.
know, I grew up in Canada where the joke was you get 9 months of winter and 3 months of construction. So that used to be the joke, and it's already snowed where I'm from.
Oh, wow.
So, and it's gloriously still fall and beautiful and 75 degrees out there today. So it's, you know,
Just
that,
beautiful.
but it's no wonder you look out your window to get a sense of, where you are in the space of the world and the seasons, things like that. Totally makes sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. Of course it does to you. You get it. We're similar in that way, um,
Mhm.
among others. Um, well, so I'd love to hear more about, well, actually, let me kick it back to you first. Is there anything else that you're all up in that you wanted to share into this space before I move us on to sort of the tools and resources?
um, no, I think that the writing and the writing life has been an odd journey in the last few years with publishing changing so much. Um, and I think that is maybe contributing to my reluctance to say this will be a book.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
Um, because it's such a difficult Sisyphus type of endeavor where you're constantly pushing rocks uphill and
Mhm.
they're constantly rolling back to you. Um, but I think keeping my mind open as those outside influences change helps me keep my head down on doing work that is meaningful,
Yeah.
um, because it can feel like it has no meaning
Hmm.
given the state of the industry. Um, yeah, there's that deep breath. Yeah, you do that for 5 years and you'll be where I am.
Well, but I love that though, because I do think that we're a society that's very much shaped around the outcome that we believe we can achieve with the effort, and that we do see the meaning is dampened
Yeah,
um, by adverse outcomes or outcomes we didn't want or whatever, rather than what I hear you
right.
describing, which is that you are in the midst of work that you find inherently meaningful, and you will find a way to illuminate this woman's history. And how that illumination happens is the question mark, and a place for you to utilize your creativity
Yeah,
and resourcefulness is.
yeah. I mean that talk about something that you're learning is that it doesn't. You can do something that is meaningful without having it be monetary
Mhm,
or monetized.
mhm.
You and that's hard for me with a marketing background because I think you should make cash off of everything you do.
Right.
I mean, what are you making a brochure for if it's not going to improve sales? That sort of thing. So it's really, I've really had to learn that in the last little while. I think it'll be constant learning for me.
Mhm.
If I like took a class on watercolor and I was like, oh my gosh, there's an awful lot to learn here. And my head wants to say, well, what are you going to do with that?
If you're not starting a green card line, then why
No,
bother?
no, I'm not going to start going to shows and art shows and things like that. So maybe I could just enjoy it for the sake of enjoying it as my for this other book, for the one I held up today when we had our little chomp and chat with yours, which is,
Yeah.
maybe it's like Churchill, who did so many paintings. Maybe I'm like that, where I just need time farting around with watercolors in order to organize the rest of the stuff I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just my stillness, maybe. So,
Yeah. Perhaps it's one of your tools, right? Like this,
maybe,
yeah.
maybe.
Well, what are the tools that you're consciously aware of right now, internal and external, as you navigate this moment in your life?
That's such a great question, and that's when I actually make notes, of course, for
Nice.
those. So internal tools have to do with some of the basic human needs. I make sure that I get a good night's sleep,
Mm,
that I move,
mhm,
or and that can mean on my bike, which I really love, or it can mean going for a walk, or just playing with the cats,
yeah.
anything like that that's physical, because I sit so much. And I'm not a standing desk person. I can't bring myself to get one because they're so ugly. So I'm not gonna my designer side won't let me do it. So moving is really important, sleep is really important, good health and eating well is really important for
Mhm.
me. Um, I know when I'm not making good decisions, it's because I'm hungry or I need a nap, or I need to move. And so I kind of fill the bank. I make sure that I get the right sleep, and I make sure I eat meals when I know I need to versus when I desperately need to.
Yes.
Um, those types of things are kind of internal. We talked about the seasons, looking at what I'm going to do in which seasons. I don't plan big projects in spring and summer because I know I'm just going to be out wanting to play too much. There's too much nymph in me that needs to be out fa la lying around in the daisies,
Uh-huh.
and gardening. So, I mean, those are not good times for me to work on those projects. Internally, I also have a really good sense of being loved and being nurtured by my family and by
Mm,
Ted and my friends. Those are both internal and external things that really drive me to enjoy what I'm doing
mm.
outside of the work thing too.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm so glad that you brought to the fore those things that can feel so basic that we don't even pay attention to them. And they're so critically important. I mean, I
They
am
are.
not a pleasant person when I'm hungry. Like bad decisions, I'm not fun to be around.
Totally. And it's one of the things that, Ted in his practice begins to talk about with people in the first couple sessions is how are you eating and how are you sleeping? And, what are you doing to get out and exercise? Do you own a kayak or a pair of running shoes? Those kinds of things. And I think they're very valuable questions. And when I look at other writers and other designers I've worked with who have not been good at completing projects, who really struggle, I see they don't nurture those things very well.
Mhm.
Um, and I kind of want to take them aside and say, like, just go to bed at 10.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, or even 11, just don't make it one,
Yes.
my grandmother always used to say, it's the sleep you get before midnight that counts the most. And I guess it kind of just stuck for me. But yeah, that my goal is to stay off of medications as long as possible
Mhm.
and use food and sleep and movement as my medications instead.
Yeah, they go a heck of a long way.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
do.
I the first time I had a GP ask me what I eat, I got teary because I was so unaccustomed to somebody in the medical community asking me how I ate that I
Oh,
was just like, "Oh my gosh, you're my person." Like, thank you.
yeah. And I'm very lucky. I've had a GP up to now who is younger and more with it. Last time I was in there complaining of an ailment, she said, now I know you, let's talk about your diet and what's been changing. So, it was really lovely that we talked about food first.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Wonderful tools, so important, and the first things to go on most people's back burners
Yeah.
when the deadlines get tight, I think.
Yeah. I think so too.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you for that. And so circle us back around. You said you'd be talking about the DAR a little bit about in
Yeah.
the nonprofit you'd like to spotlight.
Yeah, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the external things that have really been helping. You know, the DAR has for many decades it had a bad rap, right? For being this really uppity kind of organization. And I have found so many gracious people in there that are so willing to just help on projects, and they volunteer so much that um, they are more of a volunteer organization than I recognized
Mhm.
beforehand. And I wouldn't be able to have amassed quite the amount of information about Eliza without them. Um, and they did give me a bit of a framework for that project by saying, like, you want to prove somebody was a patriot, we need these things. But they're a pretty big organization, and they really do a lot in terms of preserving different things in this country too, and gathering funding and helping veterans. And I mean, there was an awful lot that I didn't recognize that they did until I became one while I was researching my novel. So um and that, that lesson learned with them, that many hands make light work, um led me recently to getting a research assistant of my own as an intern, which um, just a few hours a week. Her name's Katie. She's wonderful. She's building the database because I hate spreadsheets, and she loves spreadsheets. I don't know that she loves them, but she's way better at them and more skilled at them than I am. And she's got the academic background, but um, if she and I are certainly going to be tapping into a lot of DARs to help us gather that research together. Um, across many states. I think right now the Eliza Project, I've talked to DARs in 5 different states in order to gather information for that woman. So, and a lot of people don't know what they do. If you're interested in joining, most people think, how can I possibly be related? I'm Italian, or I'm, something else. Um, there, there's 200,000 of us across the US that are, and some of them are younger than me now, which is good. Um, some of them they're growing in their youth membership, which is wonderful to see too. Um,
Nice.
so between the DAR and James River Writers, which is a literary organization here that's also a nonprofit, I mean, I wouldn't be working on the projects I am without either one of them. So if you're in the Richmond area or in Central Virginia and you're looking to join a writer group, I would definitely recommend James River Writers would be my second
Of
one.
a group.
Yeah.
So when I attended, I and spoke, I was so impressed by the turnout. My gosh,
Yeah, they
and
get great turn.
huge
Mhm.
turnout and so much energy and so much enthusiasm. That was
They
very
do.
exciting.
It's really good. They celebrate the little milestones we all make along the way, because that's those little steps that keep you growing, right?
Absolutely.
But they're great about bringing speakers like you, who maybe not, you're not an agent, you're not a literary agent, but without you helping us wrangle who we are and the inner creatures that talk to us all the time, we can't get out of our way to get words on paper. So, I really applaud them for uh, bringing in a lot of different voices.
Mhm.
They've been my education in diversity and inclusion has in part been because of James River Writers. They've done such an amazing effort of really bringing in different viewpoints,
That's
more
wonderful.
than most organizations I see, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and so important, so important
Yeah.
in so many ways. And I applaud you. I thought the way that you organized the event that I was a part of was so smart, because you brought in an editor and an agent, as I recall, and there was it's a lot of like, rubber meets the road. This is hard stuff. Let's talk about how hard it is, and then you had me come in to like sort of get everybody jazzed in writing. Like, yeah, it's hard, but like let's keep going. I thought like that was
Yeah,
really
you got to find joy in it. Otherwise, it's just a slog. I mean, that's true of everything, right?
yeah. There's always going to be boring slog parts, even of the really wonderful
Right.
stuff, right?
I mean, I love my cats. I hate the litter box, but I
Yeah.
love my cats. You know, life has its litter box moments. It really does.
It really does. Oh, Karen, that's the most perfect line to end on. Thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and your insight and your learning and your process to share with
Thank
us.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having such a forum for getting together and really sharing it, really helping me focus too when we have these conversations.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, and I wish you and I wish myself and I wish anybody who is watching ease and joy in the midst of all of our learning curves and litter box moments.
Yes. Make memories and scatter joy.
Amen.